Hello, Year 5 and 6, and happy World Book Day. If you haven't recognized my voice already, it's me, Miss Landry, and I am going to lead you through our English lesson today. Our English lesson is inspired by the story, How the Stars Came to Be. If you haven't listened to me reading this story already, I suggest you pause this video, go back, listen to me read the story, and then come back. This lesson will make a whole lot more sense that way. Let's get started. Before we begin, you will need a pen or pencil, as well as your home learning book or a piece of paper to write on. If you don't have these things, please pause the video here and come back when you're ready. Let's get going. As I said, the text we're studying for World Book Day today is called How the Stars Came to Be, and it was written by Poonam Mystery. In today's English lesson, we will use this story as inspiration for some writing of our own. We will learn a little bit about the author, Poonam Mystery, the type of story that How the Stars Came to Be is, and then we get to have a go at writing one of these stories of our own. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Let's get going. In the top left of your screen, you can see a picture of Poonam Mystery with one of her other books called You're Safe With Me. Poonam Mystery is an illustrator who lives in the UK. Her style incorporates her love of nature as well as her Indian roots. We can see some of this in the illustrations throughout How the Stars Came to Be. Poonam Mystery loves folklore tales and stories of Hindu gods and goddesses. These stories have been a rich source of inspiration for her books, and they are an inspiration for this book, How the Stars Came to Be. Our learning objective today is to understand and use the features of folk tales in my writing. Please pause the video here and take a moment to write down your learning objective. Unpause the video when you're ready to continue. Great work. Let's get going. Before we begin, let's review a few star words that you need to understand in order to continue with our lesson. The first word is folktale. My turn. Folktale. Your turn. My turn. Folktale. Your turn. Great job. A folktale is a story often with mythical or legendary elements, made and handed down among common people. This means that folktales often use mythical or magical creatures or elements. In our story, the sun is a legendary element that is used as a character. We know that the sun doesn't really talk to us, but in our story, the sun does talk to the fisherman's daughter. Our second word today is traditional. My turn. Traditional. Your turn. Great job. Traditional is an adjective. It's a describing word, and it can be used to describe folktales. Folktales are traditional stories. The word traditional means handed down. So, if something is a tradition, it is handed down from generation to generation. Finally, the word climax. Climax. Great job. The word climax refers to the final element or event in a series. In literature or stories, it is the turning point of the story. It's that point, if we think about our story as a roller coaster, the climax is right when you're at the top and you're about to drop back down. It's that point where your reader is thinking, whoa, how is this going to end? And our final word today is hyperbole. Hyperbole. Great job. A hyperbole is an exaggeration. It means something is not to be taken literally. For an example, I could say, this story is as old as time. But that's a hyperbole. It's an exaggeration. Before we get to writing our own folktale, I thought it would be a good idea to learn what a folktale is. You may have studied folktales in other years, but let's refresh our memories. Folktales are traditional stories which are usually very old. My turn. Folktales are traditional stories which are usually very old. Your turn. Great job. They are stories which are passed down to new generations by storytellers. Later, folktales are written down, and each tale may have many different versions. Because as people tell the story, small details change. So even a folktale that started with one version may now have 10 or 20 or 100 different versions of the same story. Let's talk about some key elements or key parts of folktales. If I were you, I would jot these elements down on my piece of paper or in my home learning book. That way, when I go to write, I can remember to make use of these elements. The first element is teaching lessons. Sometimes folktales teach lessons. While this is true, in our story today, How the Stars Came to Be, we don't really learn a lesson. Our story is more a story of how something originated or where something came from. Folktales also have no specific author. They are stories that are handed down from storytellers around the world. And finally, something extraordinary usually happens to an ordinary character. Let's pause for a moment and have a think. What is the extraordinary thing that happens in How the Stars Came to Be? And who is our ordinary character? Great job. The extraordinary thing is that the sun gives the fisherman's daughter one of its rays. Could that happen in real life? I don't think so. And our ordinary character in our story is the fisherman's daughter. There are also different types of folktales. We will review a few of these, and then we'll identify what type of folktale How the Stars Came to Be is. Trickster tales are a type of folktale. This is where the main character is often a trickster. So they play tricks on other people, and usually they get away with it. Another type of folktale is a fable. These are those stories that teach lessons, such as the caterpillar and the ant, or the tortoise and the hare. These are all fables which teach us lessons. Fairy tales are also types of folk tales. The Little Red Riding Hood is an example. And finally, explanation folk tales are another type of folk tale. How the Stars Came to Be is an explanation folk tale. That means it tells the story of how something, in our case, the stars, came to be in the sky. The belief is that before this story, there were no stars, and the story's purpose is to tell us how the stars came to be. Before I ask you to write your own explanation folktales, I have found some different examples of explanation folktales from around the world. While I'm talking, you may want to jot down some examples of extraordinary things that happen or ordinary people in these folktales that may help give you inspiration for your story. The first story is called How the Night Came. This is a Brazilian folktale, so it's from Brazil. In this story, a sea goddess who is used to living in the deep, dark sea falls in love with a prince on land. When they decide to marry, she must move to the land and live in the light. But she's so used to living in the deep, dark sea that eventually she grows weak and needs the darkness. The prince sends his servants to go to the king of the ocean, and they bring the darkness back. And that is how we get nighttime. A second example of an explanation folktale is the Tale of 10 Sons. This is a Chinese folktale that also uses the sun, same as how the stars came to be, as its extraordinary thing. This story says that many years ago, a Chinese goddess had 10 sons. Like babies, male babies. They were all sons. They were also all suns, like the sun we see in the sky. In this story, the goddess's sons fly across the sky, one per day. But one day, all 10 sons get a bit greedy, and they decide to all fly into the sky at once. However, this made the earth too hot, and Hu Yi decided he needed to stop it. Hu Yi had a magic bow and arrow, and he went and shot down 9 of the sons. And this is why we have only one sun today. Take a moment and think. What are the extraordinary things in this story? And who are the ordinary people? Great job. In this example, the 10 sons and the magic bow and arrow are the extraordinary things. The ordinary person is Hu Yi. I have 2 more examples for you. I hope that you're writing down some ideas as inspiration for your story. Our next example story of an explanation folktale is an Australian folktale. It is called How Water Got to the Plains. This is a story of how the plains, the flat lands, got water, such as rivers and lakes. This story says that in the beginning, people were living on a mountain, and it had not rained for a long time. They needed water. Weary and Wallowa-Bit were greedy and stole the rest of the water and ran away. When the people woke up, they realized the water was gone, and they went after the boys who stole it. So the people were running after the people who stole the water, and the best spear shooter in the group took out his bow and arrow and shot at the water carrier, or the basket holding the water. This spear shooter had great aim, and he made a hole in the basket. But the boys who stole the water didn't realize they had a hole in the basket. They continued running, but water was leaking as they ran. And this is how rivers and lakes were created in this Australian folktale. And our final folktale is a Canadian one. It's called The Goddess of Light. And this tells the story of how light came to be on the earth. In this story, a man called Thinkley fell in love with a woman with a smile that brightened the world. So her smile was light. He didn't like when he shared her smile with others, but she said she had been created to brighten or light up the earth. Thinkley did not like this, so he locked her in a box. When he locked her in the box, he took away all the light. Darkness fell across the land. Many years later, the beautiful woman's nephew came to rescue her. When he rescued her, he realized she had turned from a beautiful woman with a smile filled with light to a great flood of light. When he opened the box and rescued her, light filled the earth again, and it was no longer darkness. And that is how light came to be. Now that you've heard some example folk tales, it's going to be your turn to write. So let's review. How the Stars Came to Be is an explanation folktale because it tells the story of how something, the stars, came to be. Your task is going to be to write your own explanation folktale about how a natural phenomenon came to be. I'm going to walk you through the steps, and then it's going to be your job to go off and write your story on your own. The first step to writing our own folktale is going to be to choose a natural phenomenon to write about. You could write about the sun, the wind, the moon, thunder and lightning, light, any natural phenomenon that you can think of. Pause the video here, have a think about what natural phenomenon you'd like to write about, and write down the story of your folktale, how the blank came to be. Great job. Now that we've all chosen our natural phenomenon, let's get thinking about our story. Now we need to think about our big idea. How did your natural phenomenon come to be? In our examples, parts of a sun ray are broken apart to become stars. A leaking bucket creates rivers and lakes. A magic bow and arrow ensures we have just one sun. And darkness of the sea is brought to the earth to create nighttime. Pause the video here and jot down how will your phenomenon, wind or sun or thunder and lightning, come to be. Come back when you are ready to continue with jotting down our ideas. Great job. Let's keep going. Finally, step number 3 is going to be to fill in the blanks of your folktale. We need to think about setting, where and when your story took place, characters, who is your ordinary character, or the protagonist, the good character, and do you have any bad characters or antagonists like the monkey was in How the Stars Came to Be? We also need to jot down a problem. In How the Stars Came to Be, our problem was that the fisherman couldn't see his way home because the moon went away. What is the problem in your story? Pause the video here and jot down your setting, your characters, good and bad, and your problem. Come back when you're ready to move on. All right, let's keep going. We're almost ready to write your 5 and 6. This is a story mountain, and it shows the way that a story should be structured. We should have an opening where we describe our settings and our character, a build-up which grows the excitement, your climax where you have your problem, and then your resolution and ending where your problem is solved and everyone lives happily ever after. I would like you to spend 10 minutes now planning your explanation folktale. I would like you to draw a story mountain and jot down ideas for your opening, build-up, climax, resolution, and ending. Think about how you'll introduce your setting and your characters, how your problem comes to be, how your characters try to solve the problem, and how the problem is solved at the end. I would suggest making a list of 7 to 8 important parts to include. Pause the video here and take 5 to 10 minutes to plan your explanation folktale. Great job, your 5 and 6. I can't wait to read your folktales. Now it's time to write. You are going to make sure you have a clear beginning, middle, and end of your story. Make sure that you use all of the good writing features that we know about and have learned about in school, including adverbials for cohesion, past tense, direct speech, different sentence structures, vivid and interesting vocabulary, expanded noun phrases, and parenthesis. Remember, showcase everything you know to make this a fantastic piece of writing. When you're finished, make sure you read your story back to check that it makes sense for your reader. I would love to see your stories. So, if you'd like, please post your story on J2E. I will look at them later this afternoon. Great job today, Year 5 and 6. Good luck on your writing, and I can't wait to read your stories. Well done.